And then after that, we will entertain your questions. So bear with us because the questions come up in chat in Zoom, and sometimes the chat gets a little busy and we have to kind of scroll through. So you'd think we'd be used to all this technology now, a couple of years into it, but I think we're still teetering on understanding it.
All right, looks like the chat is working. I'm getting some yeses.
All
Can
right.
everybody hear me as well? Jay and I are currently sharing a microphone, so. Okay, awesome. Thanks for bearing with us.
Okay, we're going to start things off. And I think this presentation could run about a half hour, but hopefully we'll try to move it right along so that we can get to your questions. So the Cultural Facilities Fund, as many of you know, has been around for quite a while now, about 15 or 16 years. And it's a program that started in the legislature and has continued with their sort of input by funding the program every year. And we get about $9.5 million a year to put on into facilities. And the program is run by the Mass Cultural Council and Mass Development. And what Miranda and I do at the council is work with you all to communicate the ins and outs of the application. And then once you submit the application, it goes into a panel review. And then it goes to some various committees that oversee the process, and finally to Mass Development for approval. And if you are awarded a grant, you enter into contract with Mass Development and move on towards disbursements. There are three grant categories. The capital grant, which is the implementation of the work. And then we have a couple different varieties of planning grants. One we call feasibility and technical assistance, which sometimes is referred to as FTA. And then the other is a conditions assessment, which is all kind of jargon for someone coming in and assessing the physical structure and giving you sort of a roadmap of what needs to happen when to keep the facility in good shape. Sorry, I'm running into a little bit of a flow issue with getting to the next slide. Bear with me. A little bit of a log jam here. Just a quick overview. Like I mentioned, the fund has been around since 2007. So we've given 1,304 grants, and the total dollar amount that's gone out is 154 million. If you aggregate the total cost of all the projects we've worked on, it's 2.7 billion. And by any measure, that's a pretty big number. And then every year or two, we ask, what's coming for you all, and we quantify that. And the next couple of years is another $700 million in projects, at least on the planning table right now. Okay. So what happened? Do I just stop share? How does that work?
I think just exit. Escape.
Escape?
Yeah.
Sorry, the computer's freezing in between slides, so I'm trying to work with this. We're just going to work with the clunky view. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, folks. Weird tech day. For some reason, the computer keeps freezing, so I think we'll have to give the presentation from here. And hopefully we don't run into anything else, but can everybody see this okay? I see some questions coming in the chat, and I just want to let you know that we see you and they will all be addressed at the end of the presentation. Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody.
This slide gives you a little bit of an indication of how the money what kind of facilities the money goes into. And the three biggies are the museums, performing arts centers, theaters, and community arts centers. Kind of makes sense. And then there's, a kind of a filling in the pie chart here with historical homes and sites and municipalities with facilities, colleges and universities, libraries, and interpretive science, environmental sites as well. So we just wanted to give you an idea of where the kind of money is going to. This should also give you a little bit of an insight into the geographic distribution of the fund. We do pay attention to this, and we haven't had to really engineer it in any way because there's demand coming from every which way. But you can see that there's some parity here as far as the input of grant applications by region and the output of grants by region. So for example, in the Western region, which is both Pioneer Valley and the Berkshires, 21% of the applications have come from there and 20% of the grants have gone there. The Northeast, 12% of the applications have come from the Northeast and 11% of the grants have gone to the Northeast. So the numbers are fairly close. I think the biggest jump would be Greater Boston, which includes pretty much everything within 95, 128, and 27% of the applicants have been from there, and 30% of the grants have gone there. Now, with the organizational budget size distribution, the way the sort of advisory committee that oversees the fund has parsed this out is in five categories, but three are based on dollar amount. And so there's organizations with organizational budgets less than $1 million, and then from 1 to 5 million, and then above 5 million. And from the pie chart, you can see that 56% of the applicants have come from organizations with budgets below $1 million, and 50% of the dollars and 50% of the grants have gone to those organizations. And as you move along, what we would call mid-size organizations are 1 to 5 million. 23% of the applications come from that size, and 27% of the grants go to that size. 5 million and greater, 11% of the applications have come from organizations of that size, and 16% of the grants have gone. And municipalities and colleges have a lot smaller demand from those entities, but 5% requests from municipalities, 4% grants, and likewise colleges, 5% requests and 3% of the grants have gone there. And that indicates the type of organizations we work with. And by the statutory language that created the fund, nonprofit cultural organizations make up the bulk of the requests, and those have to have a 501c3 designation and are primarily concerned with the arts, humanities, and/or interpretive sciences. And municipalities can apply, provided that at least half the building is dedicated for arts and cultural purposes. And the building can either be 50,000 square feet in size or 125 years old or older. Colleges and universities is generally the types of facilities we work with are the ones that are open to the public. And those would be generally the theaters and the galleries that are housed at colleges. I wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up of what's new this year, since many of you have been applying to the fund over the years. And I'll walk through these, and there may be some questions later, and that's perfectly fine. You can apply for the SRP, which was that third grant category, Systems Replacement Plan. We think generally that's a good idea to have a plan like that, or a document to guide some of the work that you do over the next 15 or 20 years. And you can certainly apply for that in tandem with any of the other two grants, the capital or the feasibility grant. So that's allowed. And the other thing that's a little bit different this year is we're allowing, you can apply for a capital grant, and over the last number of years, you have not been able to apply for a feasibility grant with that, but we're making an exception this year that if you want to start to explore how to decarbonize some of the systems in your building, or greening the building as it would be called, it's certainly okay to apply for a feasibility grant as well as a capital grant, so long as the feasibility grant has these types of characteristics. The second thing that's a little bit different is we've had an intent to apply deadline, sometimes called a letter of intent, and it's always been a little bit confusing because we've never really had a deadline for the intent to apply. We've only wanted to know who's coming in, so that if you were not eligible, we could sort of work as a buffer before you filled out the application. It's always created a little bit of confusion. So now that we have a grants management system that's a little more robust, we're going to do an eligibility quiz. So if you don't fit the eligibility criteria, that'll flag to us through the system, and then we can get in touch with you, and we can sort of head it off at the pass if there's some disconnect between eligibility and the entity that's applying. The third thing is, we introduced it last year, and this year it's fully in play, is that if you receive a capital grant in any particular year, you just have to wait a year before you can apply for another grant from the Cultural Facilities Fund. The next thing that's a little bit different is we've always had the ability to apply for the acquisition of a property, but we've always required the purchase and sale agreement be presented at the time of the application. We've taken that off the table, and just looking at the characteristics of the application that considers an acquisition of a facility or a site, and the purchase and sale can wait till later if you are awarded a grant, but before you can access the grant, at least the purchase and sale has to be part of the documentation that you provide to Mass Development. The next thing that's a little bit different is that we've always had a policy where you have to finish dispersing the grant before you can apply again. We're going to make an exception with the SRP that it doesn't have to be 100% finished before you apply. And the reason is, it is an administratively more complex process whereby you're working with us, Mass Development, and the Nonprofit Finance Fund, who hires a contractor to come out and do the assessment of the building. There are so many moving parts to this one. It moves a little bit slower, and we thought, let's just take a little bit of the pressure off of having to complete all those check boxes before you come back into the fund. And then the final thing is Miranda and my attempt to make the application a little more user-friendly, and taking off some of the requirements of the application. And I won't go into all those now, but hopefully it'll look a little bit lighter than it has been in the past. We also wanted to flag 2 upcoming webinars that we are working with some partners on. And the first one is going to be November 2nd at 10 a.m. and it's called Paths to Decarbonization. And we have tapped New Ecology, who is going to facilitate this conversation. And we're going to feature some of the projects that are either finished or in process, or are looking at the process within the portfolio that we have. And hopefully that discussion, the tips, the tricks, the resources, the conversation will move us all a little bit further toward understanding how to decarbonize the systems in our buildings and how to move towards those goals. And then on December 6th, Mass Save, a lot of us know it through the residential programs, but they do have a commercial element to it. And these are administered by all the utilities around the state, including Cape Light Compact down on the Cape. And they're interested in doing a webinar so that they can present to you all the resources that Mass Save has that would apply to cultural facilities. So these, you can go on to the Mass Cultural Council website. If you just search decarbonization, you'll find the registration for the one coming up November 2nd. We haven't put the registration link for the December 6th one yet, but that'll be coming out in the next couple of weeks. All right, so like we mentioned, there's 3 grants: the capital grants, feasibility, technical assistance, and systems replacement. I'm just going to walk through the capital grants very briefly. The maximum grant amount is $200,000. All the grants in the Cultural Facilities Fund have a 1-to-1 match requirement. And what happens if you are awarded a grant is you raise the match, and then you can access the grant through Mass Development, but it is a reimbursable grant, and that you would send in invoices for work done and get reimbursed. And you, on this round, you can send in invoices looking back to September 21st, September 1st, thank you, Miranda, September 1st, 2022. The capital grants can be used for a wide range of activity, from site acquisition to general repair, maintenance, renovation, to new construction of new facilities, or expansion of existing facilities. And then you can also use this in the final stage, pre-development activities of architects, engineers, and you can also purchase integrated and fixed equipment. Now, the application itself is in a couple different sections. The first 3 sections, organizational info, facility info, and project info, are a background picture, if you will, so that the panelists reading the application gets an understanding of the type of organization you are and the type of facility you have and the type of project that's subject of this application. So it is fairly intuitive in that we're asking for description of the facilities, description of the project. We want you to articulate if you own or lease the facility. And if you lease the facility, we are looking towards the responsibilities of the owner versus your responsibilities as a tenant, and try to align those with the request you're making. We look for a summary of the programs and activities that you bring to the public, as well as an interpretation in narrative form of how you're doing financially, even though we do ask for financial documents. Sometimes putting it in your own words is helpful. Now, the next 4 slides are going to be, these are the scorable quote sections of the application. This first one is kind of generally called community impact. These are some of the legislative requests that came through with the initial creation of the fund. And we ask you questions about you describing the community need. And that can be characterized in the community need for the particular project, or the community need in a larger sense of your organization and the work that you're doing in the community. We ask to describe how your organization impacts tourism. And our definition of tourism is anyone traveling 50 miles or more or staying overnight to attend the programming, exhibits, and content that you're offering. We ask you to describe the financial need for this particular grant. And then we ask you to describe the local support for your organization and the programming that you bring to the community. The next of the 4 sections that are scorable is this next one's called the financial capacity. And since this is a 1-to-1 match, we're looking for you both to raise the match, but also to complete the project. So we simply ask how you go about raising the money and your ability to raise the funds. We ask you to give us some insight into that. And then we're looking at the way you raise money for in the long term, the ongoing repair and replacement of the work in your facility. So one would be raising money for this particular project, and one would be just sort of a more larger, pulling the lens back a little bit on how you've done this over time. And then to add a little finer point to it, if you're expanding your facility or building a new one, and expanding programming in the space, that's going to change the operating cost dynamic in most cases. And so we're just going to have you address how you financially support the operations in that expanded space. The third of the 4 sections is project planning. Most of the work that we see coming in the requests have to do with a facility or that exists and you're renovating or maintaining what you already have. So we just want to know, do you have a needs or conditions assessment of your facility, kind of a blueprint, I guess, if you will, of the work that the facility may need from a number of different perspectives. And then we ask how you describe and identify building repairs. So the way you identify what you need to do and how what you need to do fits in to an overall facility strategy and plan. And then once again, if you're expanding, we're looking for some indicators of what's driving the expansion, such as the demand for the expanded space and or programming, and then looking at what you have done to address the impact the expansion will have on operations, staffing, and your current capacity. So it's a little bit of the same question that was in financial capacity. Financial capacity asks, if you're expanding, how are you going to meet the challenges of increased operating costs, if that's the case? And this talks about how the expanded space and programming fits into the operating model, which sometimes comes down to increased programs, staffing, and it could be the capacity has changed because you have more responsibility with a larger space. Now, the final section that's scored in the capital application is the implementation section. We ask that you provide a timeline for the work. And we're looking for projects that can proceed within 2 years. They don't have to be finished within 2 years, but they have to have started in earnest within a couple of years. And then we would ask for a project budget that includes the status of the sources of the money used to pay for the project, and the uses, the construction and the costs of the project. So we have some sample project budgets in the application that you can access to get an idea of what a project budget looks like. And then we ask that you identify the key members of the design or construction team. And you have the option to do this in narrative form, or you can upload their CVs and resumes. And there should be an upload button in a couple different places in the application, so you can upload that information for the panel to see the implementation team. Okay. We've pared down the required supplementary materials, so we're asking for a project budget, project timeline, 2 years of audits or accountant review financials or 990s. We also ask that the year-to-date financials be inserted, since sometimes the timing of your completed financials aren't quite as up to date as the year-to-date financials. We ask that you provide a lease or a deed for the property. And then if you're expanding or building a new building, any planning documents that you have assembled and used to inform your decisions to expand programmable space or physical space or both. And we ask that you include those. And then finally, some images of the facility. And that can be both larger pictures of the facility as it looks from the outside, from the inside, and maybe some specific facilities of the areas, the subject areas of the application. So that goes to the capital grant. And the second grant is the feasibility and technical assistance, or FTA. That goes up to about $35,000. Once again, there's a match requirement. And you can use this for a pretty wide range, again, of activities in the planning phases. So the first one would be the physical planning of architects, engineers. You could be doing energy efficiency planning. You could be doing ADA accessibility. Any type of planning that just fits your needs at this time, you can certainly come in from the physical perspective of changing the physical aspects of the building. Then there are the operational aspects. So if, for example, if you are you're doubling your square footage and you need some analysis from a consultant on the costs of doing so, and then looking forward the operating costs and how that tips the balance that you're currently in, you can certainly hire a consultant to do business and operation planning of the new envisioned facility. And the other main area we see is looking for how you're going to raise the money for this work. And you can certainly hire a consultant to get information for staff and board to, figure out if this is a good time to take on a capital project. And sometimes the fundraising characteristics will give you a good indicator if this is doable. So you can certainly use this feasibility grant for a number of different ways to plan for the work you're going to be undertaking. This is very similar to the slide we saw in Capital, where it is really the basic background information of the organization, the facility that you have, and the project information of this particular aspect of the work you're undertaking. Now, I will say with the feasibility grant, you can be testing the feasibility of a facility that you don't have yet. So of course, if you don't have a current facility, it's perfectly fine. We're accustomed to seeing feasibility work for things that are being envisioned and planned for now to be a reality later. So it's perfectly fine to come in for this grant if you don't own or lease a facility at this time. This is the exact same community impact section that you saw in the capital grant application, where we're looking for interaction with the community, support from the community, benefit to tourism, and financial need. The project planning that you're going to describe here is we're looking for basically how you determine the capital maintenance needs and how you prioritize that for your property or your properties. And once again, this is a one-size-fits-all question, but if you don't have a property yet, you can certainly let us know and we'll understand that this is something that's coming into being. And then we want to see is why this is the next logical step in the overall facilities and organizational planning process for your organization, just to get some background info into what brought you here and why this is the next logical step. The implementation section really centers around who is doing the planning. So we ask that you identify any planning consultants you are working with, describing their qualifications. You don't have to have them under contract, but you should identify at least someone or someones who can do the work. And we ask for a summary of the scope of work that you're looking to for the planning consultants to provide. So it's basically those two aspects: who is going to be doing the work and what kind of work are they going to be undertaking on your behalf. The required supplementary materials look very much like the capital, where the planning budgets and the timelines should be included. These are all uploadable features in our 100% online application now. We ask that you include the scope of services for the planning consultants, the financials of 2 years of audits, accountant review or 990s, as well as the year-to-date financials. The lease or deed, if applicable. So once again, if you're building something new or planning something new and you don't have a lease or deed, it's certainly fine to come in for a feasibility grant. And then finally, images of the facility if it's applicable. The final grant is the systems replacement plan, which is the conditions assessment grant that is a prepackaged grant whereby you apply for the grant and an engineer and a construction consultant is hired by the nonprofit finance fund. And what they do is work with you to schedule a site visit and get some background information. And what they're going to do is look at the building envelope and the mechanical systems, the electrical and life safety systems. And then they're going to give you a package of what the building needs by category, when it needs it, and how much it's going to cost. And this grant ranges between $7,000 and $12,500, depending on the size of the facility. Once again, a one-to-one match requirement. And the application itself is a little bit of an intake form for the uses of the building, the accessibility, how many bathrooms you have, any maintenance that's been done recently, because all of this will inform us as to what range the grant will be between $7,000 and $12,500. So if you are applying for this, there'll be a little work with staff so that we can zero in on exactly what the dollar request will be, which is based on some of the characteristics of the facility and the size of the facility. Supplementary materials are really pared down but similar. The financials are requested, as is a lease or deed, and the images of the facility would be helpful as well. So those are the three types of grant categories. And with all of the work we do, Mass Cultural Council has a racial equity plan that we're following. And within that plan, we want there to be exercises and practices of engaging and hiring, women and BIPOC organizations that are in the construction trades, that are in the architectural world, that are in engineering and in consulting, so that our resources can be equitably spread throughout the Commonwealth. And there are ways to get to this through the certified list that the state provides. And we have links to that here. And then there is a guidance the Commonwealth has that at least 15.3% of hours of construction work done by, quote, minority workers and 6.9% of female workers. And to the degree that we make attempts to meet and I think exceed these numbers, I think some of our equity work becomes real, which is the whole idea. I'm going to pass this over to Miranda. She's going to walk you through some of the content in the next few slides.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jay. And thank you to everybody who's been engaging with us in the chat. I've been frantically trying to answer everybody, and I'm so sorry if I miss anyone, but we're gonna go back through all of the comments at the end of the presentation and make sure we answer as many questions as possible. So yeah, I'll pick it up from here. And we will dive into our matching requirements a little bit. As mentioned earlier, all CFF grants are a one-to-one cash match. Capital grantees have 2 years from the date of the award to raise the matching funds, and feasibility and technical assistance grantees, as well as SRP, Systems Replacement Plan grantees, have 1 year. Of course, at that time, if a grantee needs an extension, you have the option to request another year to raise the match, so that's no problem. But that's the framework. Match sources can come from corporate, philanthropic, or public sources, but they cannot come from another state source. They can't be drawn from day-to-day operating funds or debt. Pledges also do not count until the cash is in hand. And as Jay said earlier, you can kind of consider this a reimbursement grant, as in you can submit invoices for work that has already been completed and paid for, so long as they date back no earlier than September 1st. So if you've already done some work on the project, that's entirely okay. You just want to send those invoices in, and as long as they're dated after September 1st of this year. Okay, so dates and deadlines. As Jay said, we no longer have an intent to apply process. Very exciting. So you can begin an application at any time up until the final application deadline. It is on a Thursday next year, February 2nd, 2023, at 11:59 p.m. So the system is open all day. Just got to get your apps in before midnight. Grant announcements we anticipate will be made in May of 2023, and returning grantees should be aware of another set of deadlines. If you received a grant prior to this past round of funding, so 2021 or earlier, you just need to make sure that your grant agreement for that prior grant is executed by December 4th with Mass Development, and that all of your invoices are submitted to them by January 3rd. Again, the exception to this rule is for SRP grant recipients. Okay, now we'll go over a brief overview of the components of the application. First up is the eligibility quiz. And of course, in order to get there, you need to log into the system. So here are our instructions for how to get in. If you have already been in our new grants management system, which is about a year old at this point, then you know what you're doing. Go to the login page, enter in your credentials, and then you'll be able to access all of the grant opportunities that are relevant to you. But if you haven't been in our new system, but you've applied to a Mass Cultural Council program in the past, there's a possibility that we already have an account for you because all of our data was migrated from our old system to the new one. So if that's the case for you, just want to go to this link here, enter in your email address and click Forgot Password. And if you do already have an account, the system will send you a password so that you can log in and get started. If you don't already have an account, you just need to register. And for this program, you're going to need to register as an organization and just follow the prompts from there. And again, this presentation recording as well as the slides will be available after today. So you'll be able to get this link here. Okay, so when you begin an application, the first thing you need to do is walk through the eligibility quiz. It's brief. It's just a couple of questions ensuring that you are in fact eligible for this program. You don't need permission from JRI to continue on to the full application should you pass the eligibility quiz. And if you are eligible to apply, it'll just lead you into the full app, and then you can just continue on your way. And if it so happens that Jay and I notice that there are any concerns, then we'll contact you and we can set up a conversation and talk about it. But if you don't pass the eligibility quiz, the system will let you know. It'll stop you from applying so that you don't spend any more time on it, and you know ahead of time before wasting a lot of effort that certainly goes into the process of applying. Okay, So once you get through the eligibility quiz, again, you're going to be led into the full application. It's broken out into several tabs with small text boxes and narrative questions. Everything with a red asterisk is required. And then at the end, in the additional materials tab, there is a list of materials that you will want to upload directly into the form. So a complete online application includes a response to all of the required narrative applications, as well as the submission of additional materials. And again, that final deadline is Thursday, February 2nd, 2023. So Jay and I are available all the way throughout the grant cycle. We're available by email. We are happy to set up phone calls or Zoom meetings. We are still working remotely for the most part, so it's a bit easier to get in touch with us via email. We do have phone lines, which you'll see on the next slide. And if you call, just make sure you leave a voicemail and it will be emailed directly to us so that we can get back in touch with you. But please feel free, please take advantage of our help. We're available to answer any questions and provide guidance. And we're also hosting weekly office hours every Thursday from 10 to 11 a.m. starting this Thursday, the 27th. And then once we get into January, we'll be having it every Tuesday and Thursday. So you can find each event listing on the Mass Cultural Council's agency date page and register for a session or more than one session directly in that space. And here is our contact information. So please do feel free to reach out. Again, we are here and we are more than happy to answer any questions, walk you through anything. And I think at this time we can answer some questions, and I'll take a look back through the chat and maybe start there with anybody I missed. Okay. So I have a question here from Maggie Nui. Does it strengthen your capital application for, does it strengthen your application for a capital grant to first go through the systems replacement plan grant process?
It can't hurt. I mean, if that works for you to have a capital needs assessment, systems replacement plan, it certainly is a great document. We do ask you, like we said in the application, can you put the work that you're asking us to help you with in context of what else is needed in the facility? So you can certainly do this on your own, or you may have some version of it, but we do ask you about that, and it does strengthen the application to have that information. Whether you have our exact version of it can, isn't a requirement, but like I said, it doesn't hurt.
Okay. Can we include multiple facilities projects that amount to more than $200,000? I'm assuming you mean in a single application.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've seen projects that initial number of 2.7 billion. Of all the projects we've seen, some projects are huge, where it's a $5 million project, and someone's asking us for a $200,000 grant. So we certainly see budgets that far exceed. If you took 200,000, you're requesting 200, and you have to match 200,000. So your project's going to be at least 400,000 if you're asking for the max. But we do see projects that are much bigger than that, that are over more than one building. So yes, I think the answer is basically yes.
If our organization received 501c3 status in June of 2021, can we still apply?
Yes.
Yep, the answer is yes. And, you will indicate your organization status in the system when you register for a profile if you have not already. Does CPA funds count toward the match?
Yes. I mean, technically, you have to net out the state match, which is, I don't know what percentage it is today. But since you can match our grant with municipal money, private money, federal money, you can't match it with other Commonwealth of Massachusetts grants. So CPA does have a match component, and you'll just have to net that out. But otherwise, yes.
Okay, I have a question here. Oh, I lost it. Bear with me 1 second. From Marie. Can we set up a fund through the federal opportunity zone legislation using our profit company and use the grant in our nonprofit to pay consultants who are experts in opportunity zone funding?
Oh, okay, interesting. The five, so it'd be a planning grant to hire consultants to figure out the ins and outs of the opportunity zone environment, as I understand your question. And if the 501c3 is primarily concerned with the arts, humanities, or interpretive sciences, and owns or leases a facility, but if it's a planning grant, you don't have to own or lease it. So, yeah, I think it would work, but you can certainly call us if you want to talk a little more, or email us and we can set up a time.
Can grant funds that have already been awarded for this project be counted toward the match?
So if you received a CFF grant already, can that be part of the match? Is that the question?
I can't really tell. If it is, then no, you can't match a future CFF grant
Yeah.
with a past CFF grant. But if you've received grants from other sources, so long as they're not from the state, they can certainly be used if they are not restricted or if they're designated for this project.
You know, Miranda and I are sitting right next to each other. I feel like you can take your camera off.
I could.
Sorry. I want you to think we do work remotely, but it just so happens right now we're not that remote.
I was trying to hide. He exposed me.
She didn't want to reveal our beautiful artwork in our office behind us. It's very spacious.
Yes. Okay. Next up, I have a question from Leslie. If someone else from our organization has set up an account, can we transfer email addresses? Yeah, if you need help with your account, or being able to access like reports or past records and you need it transferred from one email to another, just reach out to me and I'm happy to help. Okay. As a first-time applicant for our nonprofit Fenway Gallery at Fenway Studios, is there someone who can mentor us and help us through the application process?
I guess that's us.
We can help.
We can help. I don't know, there's I mean, we're busy, but we're not too busy to help. But I think yeah, we can certainly help. We can start you off anyway. Can't write it for you. But if you have any questions when you're writing it, certainly reach out to us. We don't want it to have to hire someone just if you don't need to, but if you need to, you might need to.
Okay. A question from Ross Hoffman. Can you speak more to reimbursement for expenses that occurred after September 1st, 2022? How does that process work? For example, a new fire alarm was installed on September 2nd, 2022 for $50,000. We paid $50,000 for the fire alarm. If we submit this pre-incurred cost to MCC, then can we seek $25,000 as reimbursement based on the one-to-one matching?
Yes, so that's the idea. You've complied with the cutoff look back date of the work being done. It has to work being done after September 1st. And then if it's 50,000, we can only pay for half, right? So I'm assuming there's more in the budget than that, but if that were the whole budget, then yes, it would be $25,000 request for a new fire alarm, and the project would be 50,000.
Okay. Bob Ainsworth said, "Hi, I'm with a small writing group looking to rent space. Does MCC have something for that?" So CFF grants can't be used toward rental costs. So
Yeah, we don't have a rent subsidy grant program, so, and I don't know if the LCC, the Local Cultural Council, would consider rent as an eligible project for, would that be up to the Local Cultural Council?
yeah, probably. I'm not sure if that's an eligible expense.
Yeah, check the
but,
Local Cultural Council. Where's Bob? Okay, did you say Cambridge?
he said he's from a small, I think, writing group. Yeah, he didn't say.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, we don't do rent subsidy, but try the Local Cultural Council. They might.
So Brenda is saying, "We have a new performance space in the center, but we'll need to upgrade stage lighting and sound for performances. Does the fund cover costs like this?"
Yeah, stage, light, and sound. Yeah, there's a limit to sort of like equipment that can leave the building. It's sort of like we say fixed equipment. A lot of sound and lighting grids and sound systems are fixed, but can't really fund microphones and cables and stands and things like that. But the bigger infrastructure, fixed equipment items we can fund, so long as it's in a building or a site that you own or lease. Um, so hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, Scott is asking, if appropriate, due to existing space and future build, is it admissible to apply to all three grants?
Hey, you asked the big question this round. Yeah, technically it is okay if the feasibility and technical assistance grant is for, quote, greening the building or decarbonizing the building. A lot of ways to describe this now. So yeah, but that the trick would be that the feasibility grant would have to be a green planning exercise.
Yeah, Scott said we also have a scheduled mass save audit scheduled for this November. Will that information be included in the systems replacement plan grant application? So
So you're going to get mass save, and they're going to, well, the systems replacement plan is not a capital grant. So if you get info from mass save that says you could use fill in the blank system, we're not, systems replacement plan isn't, it's a plan, not a replacement grant. So I do want you to understand that the systems replacement plan is a planning grant. Maybe we should call it something different, but we're sort of picked up on NFF's language here. So if you get an assessment from Mass Save that says you need this, this, and this, you can't apply for a system replacement plan to pay for it. You would apply for a capital grant to pay for it. Does that make sense?
yeah. Okay. We have a lot of questions. We're doing our best trying to get through all of them at a good pace. But next up, from Jacob Sanders, can a nonprofit real estate development company with a number of cultural projects across the state apply for multiple grants?
Well, you can't apply for more than one grant, and if you're a development entity, you would have to be primarily concerned with the arts, humanities, or interpretive sciences to apply. So if you're a nonprofit real estate developer, you're not eligible, even though you're doing great work. You would have to have the primarily arts nonprofit be the applicant, and then they would have to either lease the facility from you.
Okay. Question from Ellen, when would all reimbursements have to be submitted by? So that would happen kind of on the back end actually with our partnering agency who administrates the fund with us, which is Mass Development. You would work out a schedule with them, and it would be agreed upon in your grant contract. And I think at that point, you would basically be submitting invoices at the time that they are available to you, or it best fits your schedule. So that's something that happens afterward with Mass Development.
Yeah, you set the, when you enter into contract after raising the match with Mass Development, you set the clock. So you can say it's going to take me a year to do this. You can say it's going to take longer, and then you'll work with them to finalize that date.
Okay, question from Kyle Roberts. Is it possible for you to review a draft of a capital application and give feedback?
No, and yes. No, in that we're not going to look at the whole application and do 2 reviews, but yes, in that if you have a specific question around something, you can certainly ask, but we can't really do that for, if we did it for everyone, we'd be doing 2 reviews, I guess, and we just don't have the bandwidth to.
Hilda is asking, can I apply if my org is fiscally sponsored?
I guess the simple answer is no, well, we don't do fiscal sponsors. So the entity that applies has to be, I sound like a broken record, but primarily concerned with the arts and humanities, and has to either own or lease the facility, unless it's a planning grant where you don't have to have ownership or lease structure yet. So yeah, I'm sorry, we're in conversation with and we're making a grant to the owner or the lessee that it's an arts organization.
Okay, does the City of Cambridge or City of Boston grant or any local city grant qualify for the matching funds?
Yeah, you can definitely have a match from any of the municipalities as to match our grant. It's perfectly fine.
Olga is asking if we can drop our email addresses here. I will type those into the chat. But before that, Brenda was saying, we want to build a gazebo for performances on the grounds of our Center for Active Living. Will the grant cover costs of construction?
Yeah, we do construction grants all the time, so long as the applicant and the project are eligible. And I spaced out for a sec, so I'm not sure what the project is or the applicant.
Yeah, it's a gazebo at the Center for Active Living. So I think we'll take a look at it and see if, again, it sounds like it's gonna be whether your organization meets the basic eligibility criteria, whether it's primarily concerned with arts, humanities, and sciences. And so we would just take a look at, if you begin an application and we see your info, we'll take a look at your website, and we are happy to have a more tailored conversation directly with you, Brenda. Okay, we have another question. Yes, there will be a recording of this presentation available, and the slides will be available as well. Next up, would you consider urban agriculture programs interpretive science? We funded,
Yeah,
yep, we funded organizations like that in the past, so.
it's in the interpretation of the agricultural science and not in the commercial aspect of the business. So and generally, if you're a 501c3, you have an educational purpose, so that I would assume that would be the case here, but we should talk to be double sure.
Maureen is asking, can in-kind contributions be counted toward the match?
No, it's cash match.
Yeah. Okay. We've got a community center and an admin space. Could funding support building updates needed at the admin office? They are on the same block in the same neighborhood.
Yep. So a back office or supportive service areas of an organization, we have certainly funded in the past. So yes.
Is the allocation from the Mass Legislature going to be larger this year thanks to the American Rescue Plan funds going to the state?
Not to my knowledge. There was an infusion of uh, ARPA money into the state last fiscal year that filtered into the Cultural Facilities Fund last round, where we made more grants than we ever have before at one time. And as far as, and then the other ARPA money with the agency has just, the application for organizations just wrapped up, and the application for individuals is, the deadline is November 1st. And I think the rest of our ARPA money is going there. Now that's to say, I think there's another pool of that money that hasn't been allocated with the legislature yet. I don't know how much that is, but so I haven't heard anything yet that our 9.5 million will increase, but if it is, we'll gladly accept it.
Okay. Jessica is asking, for a new build cost or for the planning costs, does it matter if the 501c3 operates land or space from a revocable trust?
No, so long as your agreement with that trust indicates that that's your responsibility, that aspect of the leasehold improvement. So I don't think it poses a problem, but it really does come down to what your responsibilities are and what the trust's responsibilities are, because we can, by law, fund an eligible 501c3, but there's a lot of people and entities that own property that we're not here to fund. So I just want to be sure that we're sort of staying inside of our own guardrails, and you can reach out to us with the specifics of that so that we can be sure that we're proceeding in the way that we're intended to work.
Great. Okay. Okay, we have already hired the contractor for our project, which has just started and will take place in phases over the next year. Not sure if we will meet the Massachusetts DEAI guidelines with this contractor. Will that make our application less competitive? For what it's worth, we might still have some flexibility with the subcontractors.
Yeah, that's not a scoring element to our application, not to say that it won't be in the future, but for this round, nothing was approved that said with DEI metrics had to be at a certain level in order to be competitively funded. At this point, we're encouraging organizations to hire BIPOC and women consultants, contractors, architects, and things like that. But there's no scoring mechanism that would put you at an advantage or a disadvantage at this point for that.
Okay. Scott is asking, when creating a login, if I am a representative of the school as assistant director, but applying for grants on behalf of the 501c3 that owns the building, can I be the one applying for the grant? I think the short answer is yes. Not sure if I'm understanding fully, but if you're registered in the system, regardless of what your title is, if you're the contact for an organization, you can start an application on behalf of that organization. Okay, Ruth is saying, Ruth put something in, you put something in the chat about the contract with Mass Development and that you're not sure if you ever received it. I would say send Lillian and Carol an email and CC me. I know that we've talked a whole bunch, Ruth, so just email us and we'll get that figured out for you outside of the Zoom chat. Okay. Maggie is saying, just to confirm, with the reimbursement process, orgs need to have the upfront costs available to pay for services. Is that correct?
Yes, but there's a qualified yes in that you could conceivably have everything done where the access to the grant is in place, meaning you've raised a match and you've entered into contract with Mass Development. And if the work was being done in real time, you could send in the invoice to Mass Development from the contractor and be wired the money so that your cash flow wouldn't be interrupted. It's a little bit of a timing thing. So in a lot of cases, you're going to be paying the contractor and being reimbursed. But there's scenarios where you can certainly time things where the invoice is coming in and the wire is coming from Mass Development back in so that you're not actually fronting the money, but it's coming in real time.
Okay, if we applied for a planning grant and were successful and had submitted reimbursement bills and closed the grant by the end of 2023, could we still apply for a capital grant in 2024, or does the 1 year wait period apply? So yeah, the 1 year wait period only applies to capital grant recipients. So in this upcoming round, or FY23, if you apply for and receive an FTA grant or an SRP grant, you can close that out and then come back in the following year and seek capital funds. The 1 year wait period only applies to capital grant recipients. And of course, for capital and FTA grant recipients, you need to close out your current grant before you can come back, either way. So, are libraries eligible?
Yes, libraries are eligible. You would have to demonstrate, since that community impact section kind of centers on engagement with the community through programmatic content. That would make the library competitive as opposed to a library that provided content for me or you to go in and access and research. But I think libraries do better in this fund if there's an active engagement, opportunity through programmings, through lectures and things like that. So the answer is yes.
Okay, Sandy's asking, she says, we were awarded a capital grant in October 2021. Are we ineligible to apply this year? You are eligible to apply so long as you close out your current capital grant. And that's it. We've gone through all the questions. And we've only been on here for an hour. So thank you all. Everybody. Yeah, thank you everybody so much for joining us. I hope that this was helpful and informative. Please do take advantage of our office hours and feel free to reach out to Jay or I with any questions. We are here and happy to chat with you. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Take care, everybody.